Just right. The house. Well, they did. And I know that. Yeah.
All right, it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. As always, Open Meetings Act posted on the northwest wall. And Lisa, if you want to go ahead and call roll.
Vance?
Here.
Brad?
Yep.
We're missing Sean and Dustin.
Yeah, and I expect they'll be here, so we might jump around in the agenda a little bit tonight to cover some things we won't have to vote on, because I expect those guys will be here shortly. We didn't have any indication they weren't coming, so. We'll skip the consent agenda and go on down. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Item 4. We'll open that at 5:01.
Should we do the pledge and open meetings up?
I did announce open meeting. Yeah, let's go ahead and pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Got ahead of myself. Did you say you want to do some consent agenda?
No.
We'll wait till those guys get here. Yeah, mayor's report. No appointments this month, and I think my report will just be rolled into various items as we go along. How does that sound? So the public hearing, do we have anything to open that with on the planning commission recommendation regarding subdivision and replat lots 1 through 18, outlot A and Morrison, second edition?
Talk about that, conference and their attorney there.
Well,
Conference in, I kind of.
why don't you go ahead and explain what it's about. If anybody here wants to make comments, we'll get their attorney on later. I don't know that anybody's here for that, but there could be.
Sure, so this was a request of a replat of an existing lot in Morrison Edition. Right now, there's an apartment complex sitting on this lot owned by H&S Partnerships out of Omaha. Right now, the complex is platted basically as one lot. They would like to subdivide that into 19 lots and create townhomes rather than apartments that can be sold off individually. So that is their request. They have a preliminary plat, final plat. The planning commission did meet on Monday of this week and discussed with their attorney, had some questions answered and reviewed their documentation. And essentially, I think the consensus of the planning commission was that from a legal standpoint, the subdivision met the requirements. There was no necessarily legal considerations. They had some concerns, I think, about basically who's responsible for those properties when you have shared roofing, shared siding, lawn maintenance, snow removal, that sort of thing. The attorney did indicate that they had planned to install a homeowners association for those properties. So the planning commission asked their attorney to address in a little bit more written detail of what that homeowners association would consist of and how they would address those issues, so that memorandum is in your packet. Where they have sort of, I guess, bulleted, responded to some of those concerns. So that is, I guess, the background on that one.
Yeah, and later on, we'll leave the public hearing open, later on, we can just call their attorney and see what his
Yeah, if you have questions, please
comments.
answer those. So, yeah, the recommendation essentially by the planning commission was if you, the council, find their written plan for the homeowners association acceptable, then they didn't have any other.
Anybody from the public have comments on that particular item now? Not that you can comment later too, but. I think we'll jump down, looks like there's a lot of folks here, I'm guessing about the Highway 7 detour route, so we might just address that right away. I can just tell you that, at our last meeting, the council voted to take an official stance on the preferred route, so wrote a letter to Department of Transportation, and we got a response from Mark that said at this point that they plan to utilize the Pine Street detour. They did say that they would cap the repair costs. They wouldn't pay any more than they had estimated for the Oak Street detour, but that amount was actually higher than they estimate for the Pine Street detour, so I don't know that that's really an issue. I don't know that we have to take any action. We've already done what we wanted to, or you guys did, and I think you got the response you wanted, so.
Yeah, we might not have to vote because if they're gonna do it, then
Yeah, the only other thing that he added was, they had originally done all of their public stakeholder feedback comment with the proposed Oak Street detour, so they would be doing more public input, but they were gonna, I think he said, do that through a mailing for the Pine Street. So depending on that feedback, they may or may not move forward on schedule, depending on if we have to do more in-person stuff.
so it might delay the project a little bit, maybe, possibly.
Possibly.
So that's really all we had for that item. Just wanted to report back what the response was from Department of Transportation. So, with that, I think we'll move on to the next item on the regular agenda is the LBA 40 Economic Development Fund activity, and Christian's here to give us a report. Apologize for oversight last month, not getting on there, but probably not much has changed in a month.
Nope, actually, probably not. So what I did is I just wanted to give you guys an update. Obviously, you see all of the applications, so you know that there haven't been a lot, it doesn't seem like. We have sent out 14 packets or provided assistance to 14 potential applicants. One was awarded, and that was a facade application. One is table, and we anticipate that she'll be back in March. One is partially completed. We actually received half of it on Monday, and we're meeting on one more document. So I expect that'll be coming here very shortly, like the facade. I do think that part of the facade timeline of why we are seeing some of these wait is they're waiting the time of Main Street project, because if we're gonna tear things out, let's do it once. And then I also spring, would be a little bit warmer before we start tearing out windows and doors. So I anticipate we'll see more facade here really shortly. I had one that was a business loan, and actually it was the day before it was the deadline of turning it in, they withdrew. And it was nothing to do with LB 840, it was actually the seller chose another option. So that business was still transitioned. There are 3 business loans that are partially received. So when I say partially received, it may mean that I have received their tax returns, or I've received their pro formas, or we're in the process of updating their business plan. I have one that I think they have everything except a letter of intent from their banker. So I anticipate next month might be a busy month for you guys. There's 4 of them that were requests for business loans. And on those 4, nothing has been received. So whether they come back to us or whether they've found another route, we don't know. One of them I do know, it's due to a lack of a suitable building. So they have not given up on their project, they just haven't found the building that they need to meet their requirements. And maybe they will consider construction. So that was an option. They found another building and made an offer just a couple weeks ago, and we haven't received word back yet. I do have the one facade that's, they've definitely said they're waiting until spring. I have one demo request. We determined that it did not meet the guidelines, so it will never come to us. And then we have one that is a potential for a housing project, and it's in the process, I guess. They've submitted part of their performance, but that's all I've seen so far. So it just gives you a little bit of a rundown. Based upon the business loans that I see coming through, or the ones that have submitted partial applications, if all of those were to come through, we don't have enough money. So it could potentially be a good problem. You know, and these 14 are just LB 840. These are not any that we've sent over to REAP or that we've got through RIC board, or we've got local financing. These are just simply LB 840. So that's just a quick rundown. Like I said, those ones that are hanging out there, there's several that are very sizable. I know one, we actually had them inquire about even bonding. So we're not sure that it will meet the requirements or not, but to be determined when it gets to a low thing. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, or from the general public? And in that time frame, LB 840 also passed, but everybody should be well aware of that, hopefully by now.
Thank you.
Yes,
No questions? Thanks.
don't let me off to look easy. Okay, fair enough. Thank you, guys.
Welcome, guys. We jumped around on the agenda a little, took care of some things that we knew we weren't gonna be voting on. So we can catch up on all of that after the meeting. If you have questions on something that you don't hear about as we go along. Alright. Maybe now we should go ahead and, well, let's go on to the next item, please. Discuss and consider the engineered plans for Highway 7 project. Since we have some visitors here on that, for the downtown revitalization plan. We got Doug here, Doug Loudon here from Olson, and see Jess. I thought he was
Jess isn't here tonight, no.
not coming
He's
tonight. but-
at some training down in Kansas City. Austin is here with
That's
me
right,
here,
yeah,
so,
I
yeah.
recognize Austin
Yeah.
too.
I guess it's kind of a two-part thing. I kind of already mentioned a little bit the rehab project on Highway 7 that the state's gonna be doing. So, if it's all right with you, I'll just go ahead and talk about where we're at on the north portion. So, the plan kind of from the beginning is to get your sewer deeper all the way at the south end of the new DOT project next year. To do that, though, we need to run all the way from that south end, all the way up north to the plant on Main Street. Which means there's a portion of the project, and that's the portion I'm gonna talk about tonight, just from 4th Street up to the plant. So I put together, and I'm actually close to being done with plans for the rest of it as well, but right now, I'm at the point, I got plans prepared for just that portion, the north portion of the project. The plan is to do sewer, of course, because we need to get everything deeper all the way back to the plant to get that deeper down the south end. And in addition to that, do water, and then of course, if we're tearing all that up, we have to put the paving back in place. So it's a water, sewer, paving project, basically all city utilities on there. So where we're at on the plans, I believe you should have plans somewhere in your packet or available there. Plans that we put together for that, for all 3 of those items. We're essentially at the point now, I've got DE's approval and plans. We're pretty much ready to put this out to bid and start looking for a contractor. So I kind of put together a tentative plan. Problem is, we had to make a change. Lisa and I have been working with the funding. There's a disconnect between CDBG and SRF. that CDBG wants all of the water and sewer done before their portion of the project starts, and CDBG is only funding paving up there. So I need to go back to my plans, make some changes there on doing that, so that all the water and sewer can be done before paving starts. Just so you know, the plan is, we'll probably put in, so what I wanted them to do is go block by block. You do water and sewer on one block, you start tearing up the next block while you're paving behind yourself on the previous block.
Gives access to.
Gives access to the homeowners, opens that access back up. So now instead of paving the section north of where they're working, we have, build it back up to grade and put down some temporary gravel that then will get, once the water and sewer's done, contractors will come back, pull that temporary gravel up and pave in behind themselves. So that's kind of where it's at now. Like I said, we're pretty much ready to bid. Have you talked to them at all about moving the meeting? Or
I haven't yet.
you hadn't brought that up yet? Okay. We can't get it out and bid before your March 8th meeting, which would be great to get it awarded as quickly as possible. So I don't know if it's possible to have a special meeting or move the March meeting to like the 15th. And we're just like a week off of being able to get that scheduled in there. It takes time to bid things, you gotta give the contractors time to look at it, that sort of thing. We need a little bit more time to make changes to the plans, so, yeah.
Yeah, we could probably handle it either way. We could either
Okay.
move the regular meeting, or for certain purposes, we have special meetings.
Sure, sure.
That lots of times.
Yeah. That doesn't matter to me, you'll have to award the project at a public meeting, public council meeting, so, whether that's a regularly scheduled meeting or special or whatever.
And the
Sorry.
March meeting's early, it's on the 8th of June.
Yeah. Yep,
That's what
probably.
we would sort of toss around, maybe pushing the regular meeting back a week to the 15th.
Yeah,
And that gives you enough time.
that gives us enough time, yep.
Or we could still have it on the 8th and then have
Yes,
another
for
one a
sure.
week later. It's up to you guys.
How much time do you think that meeting, that probably won't take long to, once you get the bids in to vote on that probably, or?
Cross your fingers and keep them crossed from now till the bid opening.
Okay.
If the bid's coming good and there's no major discrepancies or problems with it, which happens probably 95% of the time, yeah, it's a quick in and out meeting. I mean, one item on the agenda, essentially. However, it does happen that there's discrepancies in bids, or bids come in way higher than I was anticipating on the estimate. And in that case, then, yeah, you're talking a longer meeting. So, way more to discuss.
Well, I'm not against having two meetings, but.
Well, maybe that's the easier thing, and we've got a couple of public hearings slated for the March meeting, and for sure these notices have already been sent to them. So, for ease, I suppose, or
Let's do a special meeting for the bid letting on the 15th.
The bid opening would be
Bid
the
opening.
13th, and then we'll take all the numbers back from the contractors, excuse me, check all their numbers, make sure the math works out, all that sort of thing, and then we will give you a recommendation to award to a specific contractor. And that's the only item that would be on that meeting, probably, is to award to X contractor for.
That's the best way to go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, either way, that's fine.
Okay.
Just make sure we get the next.
Doug,
Yeah.
we've seen on other projects or contractors back to the point where you're actually getting a few competitive bids on these, or
We are.
are you lucky to find one bidder?
No, actually, I've been hearing from a lot of contractors, they're hungry for work this summer. Yep. Not everyone is, but yeah, it's getting back to being reasonable. And we can get pipe again, that was actually one of the biggest holdups, was even getting pipe. I mean, you couldn't order it, nobody pulled the prices, and yeah, the prices they did get were 3-4 times. Now we're back to being 20% what it was pre-COVID.
What's your anticipation for the start of this project?
Well, so say we award it mid-March, on the 15th. Usually takes a month to get contracts in place, which fits well with your April 12th meeting. My guess is, it all depends on how the contractors are doing. If they've got some early season work already lined up, maybe they won't, but if they're really looking, They may start in May even, yeah. Yep.
So we're planning on having all of this done ahead of
Yes.
next year's
Yep,
Main Street.
yep. We essentially have to have it done ahead of, yeah. Because, yeah, essentially, I mean, if you started putting that sewer in down to the south on DOT's Main Street, now your new sewer's down here, your old sewer at Fourth Street is here, that's not gonna work, you know, water doesn't flow uphill.
I just know they initially talked about trying to coincide with where they're doing concrete for Main Street,
Mhm.
potentially looking at having, well, the concrete plant was operational.
Think about doing that first block in front of the library.
But this
doing that
sounds like
with-
this
with
is gonna be
concrete.
on its own
We probably could
standalone.
still possibly do that first block concrete.
So the way I'm bidding it, it's all of it, all three blocks are gonna be either, concrete or asphalt, one or the other. I'm bidding it both ways just to see where numbers come back in, and that would be another thing to discuss at the award meeting of, you know, yeah, what's preferable, which is the cheaper option, which is the better option, you know, what you guys prefer to do. You know. So, that way we'll have prices for both concrete and asphalt. So I guess the only thing I really need from you is a motion to approve us to put the plans and specs out to bid with the change that we discussed. I'm also gonna change the tie-in point a little bit. I talked to DOT. We're gonna shift some of what I have in these plans now over to the DOT project. I think that'll be easier that way. If there are any other questions, I'll
Yeah. Anybody wanna hazard a motion?
or questions. I'm up here to answer questions. I never know what all to bring up or not bring up, or, I mean, if you want, we can walk through these plans page by page, but.
It's moved to authorize Olson and Associates to release,
Advertise.
advertise for bids for the plans as presented as adjusted.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, any other questions? Then call roll.
Brad,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Dustin,
Yes.
Vance.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, so part two tonight,
Washington.
yep, I'll let you introduce yourself and
I'm Austin Bottle, I'm a landscape architect, at the office
my plan is one of those, so, yeah, well, I say summer, fall, probably this year. Yeah. That's what he said. Okay, perfect. Should be out there by then.
Thank you.
So in general, on the first page, you can kind of see the extent of the project, also from Burns to the highway up on the north. Most of the streetscape improvements are sidewalks with some decorative paving in between the sidewalk and the back curb, except for the southern furthest block that is mainly some natural native grass landscaping between the sidewalk and the back of the curb, and some street trees planted spread throughout the block. We start going through the packet, we can talk in a little bit more detail on what this is gonna look like. So basically, starting on the north end of the project on Main Street and Highway, kind of we're planning on sort of a monument entrance open to Ainsworth sign on the north end of the site there. That would be number one in the image on the bottom left. Across the street, there would be a smaller kind of monument feature that would tie into that aesthetically, just kind of signaling the end of the downtown corridor, basically. And then the rest of the images are just some of the typical aesthetics of what it'll end up looking like. So the number 3 and 4, those are 3D models of what that would kind of look like in perspective. Most of the trees along the street we came up with these iron tree grates. You can see that image on the bottom right. It's just a cast iron surface that is kind of that weathered steel look. You can walk on top of it and basically just floats above the flaming. That there, then at 1 or 2 instances throughout each block, there are these larger planting beds that will have a cast in place concrete seat wall, just a 1.5 foot tall kind of block of concrete that serves as basically a bench, and then surrounded by planters that contain landscape material, mulch, and to keep any salt or de-icing substances out from harming the plants. And then the rest of the materials for the project are kind of in these images down at the bottom right. So like I said, the plan is to have that sidewalk zone, which is the tan color, just standard gray concrete. The more, printed out a little peach, but that orangish color is intended to be a kind of more earth tone, integral colored concrete, not applied on the top so it won't chip or rub off or fade over time. It'll be integrally colored with the concrete, so it will kind of uniformly fade or just change color. It will kind of, if you've ever seen the applied, they kind of don't last as long as some of the but that's kind of that image on the bottom right there, that kind of buff color. And the plan is to do a sandblast finish in kind of that wave pattern that goes down all the way down Main Street. You can kind of see that in the bottom right image as well. Those are just different levels of the same concrete with strengths of sandblasting, and so it kind of just exposes the aggregate that's integral to the concrete mix. Just a great way to kind of change the color in a relatively affordable way that holds up and doesn't wear and doesn't require a lot of maintenance over time. And so we kind of like that approach in a lot of instances, rather than where either pavers are undesired or too out of budget. So. And then just walking through, if you jumped ahead, those conditions, we can kind of see them applied to each block along the street. Crosswalks would have a separate integrally colored concrete, just to signal that is a walking zone, and that the area behind the curb is technically kind of not just a transitional zone between the parking and the sidewalks. So that would just be a kind of charcoal color, just darker gray basically, to stand out if the road is paved with concrete. You're saying asphalt is an option?
No, not for this portion. Asphalt is just for the portion north of Fourth Street.
Okay. Yep. Just making sure. You can also see at the intersections there's some proposed bump outs just to kind of reduce the crossing widths for the pedestrians crossing the street, just makes it a shorter walk for them to get across the street. Nice sort of walking environment. And then in the block between kind of second and third, on the north side there is a public plaza space that has been planned. You can see where that number 7 is with the orange dashed line. That is the space kind of reserved for the daycare right there. That's the outdoor patio space. So working around that, we try to create a little bit of a landscape buffer. There could be some landscape material, or just evergreen stuff in front of that fence right there. Just kind of be a little separation between the two spaces, as well as some trees, just to kind of really visually separate that from the edge of that space there. The bathroom, number 4, is that structure in the back. And then the leftover space is really just enough space to do kind of one plaza space. In decorative paving, this could be pavers, or it could be that colored concrete to match the streetscape. And that number 3, there would be some benches that would sort of match the streetscape project along that one edge. And then a shade canopy on the opposite edge up against the theater building, just to kind of create a nice spot to sit. Some options to consider would be kind of like fans that are shown in that bottom right image, or some built-in heaters, so that, you know, it's not just when it's those few nice days that we have in Nebraska out there, it's actually a usable space when it's, you know, not so much, maybe not like to make it 30-degree days, but you can kind of get more use out of it that way. And we think just kind of those two things, the canopy and the open space just across from each other, offers just enough flexibility for you to have different events here. I think you have some things that are shade structures, some seating, you know, stage under the stage under the shade structure, some seating out in that plaza area. You know, you can set up some tents for a market or something. Just really flexible space that allows you to kind of arrange it how you want. That's just basically the intent there. And then walking further south, getting first, again, it's that same condition that we talked about before, just accommodating more of those existing curb cuts for the street and trying to space these aesthetic improvements around those, just so it's still functional in the way that it works today for turning movements in cars and everything. And then the block further south of that is that where that condition sort of changes in that yellow color, that more yellowish green in between the street and the sidewalk is more of a native grass landscaping, a little bit lower maintenance than stuff you don't have to mow it down once a year, but you know, it gives you that good prairie look that really native to Nebraska, and I think that people kind of around here really connect with and I do. And then you can see that sort of diagonal crosswalk with the trail crosses over Main Street. That again would be that darker color concrete with another one of those smaller monument features signaling the opposite entrance to downtown, and then a small seating area with a water bottle, a little drinking fountain for people that would go along the trail. And that was just I didn't bring enough to pass around, but whatever you guys want to do with them, I'll just bring all these here with you after that.
Austin, I had a couple of questions. So
Yep.
we've talked in the past about line of sight issues at those intersections on Main Streets, second, third especially. Looking at this, and the same for the intersection with Highway 20, this design is showing trees on both sides right at the intersections. Are you worried line of sight issue? Again, we put those bump outs in to kind of take away some of the parking spaces, but are those trees gonna be an issue for line of sight?
No, we looked at that map, yes.
You brought it up,
Yeah, we looked at them, that those were appropriate locations. You know, you pull up all the way to the back of that colored concrete crosswalk strip, and then you can kind of see it's just right to your immediate right, so everything in front of you beyond that 90-degree angle should be open. We didn't, for that reason, again, we didn't put any larger landscaping in those bump outs or anything. It's all just at grade, so imagine if you're in your car, this tree would just be right to your right, and we should be able to see everything. So we weren't really concerned about those. They kind of look bigger in plan just because they're canopy circle. You know, those will be up higher. You should be able to see through them, but really the only thing that would obstruct your line of sight would be the trunk, which will, you know, be pretty small for the first 10, 15 years, but even then it's about a foot wide, so it's a pretty easy thing to see around.
Only because Sid is not here, what kind of trees are you planning on?
Haven't picked those out
Okay.
specifically yet, but something that does well in kind of the planting conditions, is something that thrives in the climate. And easy to maintain. Honey locust is always a good option. Just nice little leaflets that they kind of blow away. You don't have to root up.
No no fruit bearing trees, right?
No fruit.
Okay.
Nobody likes those, we found out. Yeah, so it will just be more kind of a deciduous shade tree. They don't get as typically see in like your backyard, just because of the restricted planting zone, so they stay a little bit smaller and they're a little bit easier to maintain. But yeah, we'll pick whatever's appropriate for the condition.
And root structures on those don't affect concrete.
Yeah,
Maybe 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, we typically try to avoid the more aggressively rooted trees.
Anybody else have questions or comments? Did you need any action on this tonight, or is this more, we're still in the reviewing stage, planning stage?
Yeah, I still just reviewing, planning.
The main, motion was for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I understood was just kind of a general update that you can find and seeking feedback if people think so.
Yeah, I see, I mean, you know, we had a discussion a week or two ago, and I see basically everything we talked about was added in or adjusted, so.
Yep, and then if there's anything else, feel free to get on the list and then working that in there. Things like that, if there are any different concerns.
And that, number 2 small one feature that's like on the south end too. Is that gonna have that windmill type feature tied into smaller, or?
That might be not an actual windmill, I mean, like a detail, maybe it's in that middle piece that's on top. That sure, kind of worked in there, it looked like.
It would be a,
That'd be a little bit, that's some level of detail that we haven't quite captured yet, but, yeah, that would be a good idea to.
like on the south end, we
That
could
there.
go larger and make the small one on the north.
Yeah.
Not quite full.
I think it'd be a good number.
I see all the handicaps throughout the project, I'll have, ramp approaches off of.
Yep.
Instead of coming back around to the corner curve, there's a.
Yeah, they should all have.
They have a ramp right there to the sidewalk.
Yeah, the technical ones with their forms, it's functionally a really good layout. You just get right off to the side of the car and you don't have to, sometimes you'll see them in front of the car and that doesn't really help them, right? So it's right where it should be. Is that a DOT layout?
That's a DOT layout, yeah. All the parking is actually DOT's layout, not
Okay.
ours.
That's right, I agree.
I was thinking that a lot of these
Yeah.
things are dictated more or
Yeah,
less.
they basically gave us from the curb to the building front that we had a little bit of options to play with, but nothing in the road itself. Yeah.
So Greg, don't get mad at us for taking out your pond there.
I've already got it stocked with fish, so you leave it alone.
So is this wider, or like how's this gonna work with the snow pile in the middle of the street?
Or is it the street width from curb to curb, is that your
Yeah.
reason? I think it's the same, right?
I believe it's the same.
Yeah.
Because as it sits right now, like we just had a huge snow, this huge pile in the middle of the street, people are actually parking on the curb, so simply the fact that it'd be pretty tight to get a semi between this back of a vehicle and the snow built up in the middle of the street.
Trying to think about what you're describing there. But as far as I know, the curb lines remain the same. I believe the bump outs are new.
The bump outs, yeah, the bump outs are new.
So they're,
Well, they-
There's not a larger incline,
When I
though,
look at it now,
curb to
the
street.
snow, the snow's got to be pushed closer to the center of,
I would say, are we gonna have a major issue if we have big snow? Basically, everybody had to park on the sidewalk because there's no room and the snow wasn't getting cleaned out in the middle of the street. Well, if you're gonna put a curb and all this decorative stuff in there, basically, you're gonna have no room for semis to roll down Main Street with the snow piled in the middle of the street.
Now, if you would've come down Main Street,
especially the bump.
all the snow in the middle, vehicles on both sides, literally their back tires are at the curb and the front half to 3/4 of their vehicle is onto the
on the
sidewalk.
sidewalk? Okay, yeah, well, then
And
that
2 to
would,
3 feet shy of the building. That's why I wanted on the incline, because I don't know any other way to do that if the snow gets piled in the middle.
We talked
Yeah.
about that a little bit a week or so ago. It's just, I mean, the city might have to adjust some of its snow removal.
We do how we do snow removal, have to get it off the center, say possibly a snow blower, so we don't have to.
Or not pile it in the center, because
Yeah.
like if you do this,
the way I see it, if we have a snow like we just had, you will not be able to park on Main Street.
Yeah.
You could park parallel.
Well, unless you're parking parallel.
Take, I mean, it's not, I was gonna say, we haven't been letting the snow sit in the middle like we did, years ago. We try to pull it off as soon as we can, but, knowing that you've got more restriction than we have now, then, yeah, we might have to make some adjustments to how we do that.
Well, yeah, I would just make sure that we're all aware that, if we do something like this, which I think is a good idea, I like the looks of it and all that, I'm just
I
like,
think it's doable. I
Right.
think we can come up with plans of.
but I don't wanna have a huge snow pile that's 15 feet wide in Main Street or 10 foot wide like it was,
Yeah.
and then basically nobody's able to get out of the way to park on Main Street.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have this kind of snow.
I mean, granted, it happened.
Thankfully.
This is 1 year of whatever. But I got another 10%. People have to adjust.
I mean, even if it's not, as much snow, it's still, every year when it snows and it's piled on Main Street, everybody's parking on the sidewalk.
And also one of the reasons they do park on the sidewalk, even right now, is because there's so much water in the gutter, it's not flowing away. Well, hopefully this will improve a lot of that flow of the water, so they don't have to step out into the water, so they step out the sidewalk.
Yeah, it should be a lot smoother, and DOT's putting in a lot of storm sewer all the way up and down there, so.
Instead of just at the corners.
What's that?
Instead of just at the corners.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
It'll be nice.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's roll back to the top of the order and go to the consent agenda. As always, you can consider all items with one motion or consider items individually through the minutes, claims, treasurer's report, and department heads.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll.
Sean?
Yes.
Dustin?
Yes.
Vance?
Aye.
Brad?
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. I think now we'll move on to finish up this public hearing, which I guess is gonna involve all their attorney and see what he's got to report.
The attorney's name. Michael.
Michael Sands from Paragon.
This is.
Michael, this is Lisa Schradel with the City of Ainsworth.
Oh, Lisa.
Can you hear us okay?
Yep, I can.
Okay, we have you on here at the city council meeting with our councilmen. We have Dustin Barthel, Sean Furno, our mayor, Joel Palmer, Councilman Brad Fiala, and Vance Heyer.
Great. Well, I appreciate you dialing in. My name is Michael Sands. I'm the attorney for the current owner of the property on the plat for you at H&S Partnership. So essentially what is before you tonight is a replat of a property that is currently utilized as an apartment rental facility. The new and current owner intends subdivide the parcels so that it can be converted into single units that can be owner occupied as opposed to being on a single parcel. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope that you also have before you a memorandum that we put together following up on some of the issues that were brought up at the public hearing for the planning commission. So I'm happy to answer any questions related to that or to the replat in general.
Okay, you didn't have, this is Joel, and there's nothing to add to what you had provided already?
No, sir. As far as what's in the memorandum, you know, that was based on specific questions that arose as part of that planning commission hearing. So that's really all we addressed in the memorandum. But no, nothing has changed or been added with respect to that. Certainly, the declaration for the HOA will have a number of different items outside of those that are discussed in the memorandum, but we just focused on the ones that were brought up at the prior meeting.
Sure. Yeah, hopefully you all had a chance to look at that. Does anybody have any questions for Michael? Additional concerns?
Joel, could you ask current tenants to give them the right first chance to purchase the units, and if not, they'll be listed, they'll have to relocate, or can you ask them?
Michael, I had a question from the audience about current tenants, if they will have a first option to purchase, or how that might occur, how that will transpire.
Sure. Certainly, I don't know about, there's obviously nothing contractual as to a first option under the current leases or anything like that, but certainly if there is interest from the current tenants to purchase the units that they live in, I think that would probably be an easier transition than any on both sides. So that's something I'm sure that my client would be interested in. We kind of actually talked about that and mentioned that the other night. Certainly it wouldn't come at, it would, the properties would be marketed at what they're marketed at, but I don't see any reason why, if there were some interest, that they wouldn't talk to the current tenants first about purchasing them. I think they'd be happy to do that.
One reason I ask is there's limited opportunities if they're having to relocate for anything. So,
Okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable, certainly.
And on the relocation issue, I would just add, it's extremely possible that some of these, certainly will get, purchased by individuals that intend to occupy them, but it's also certainly possible that people could buy these as investment properties and that they would still act as rentals, not as part of a single kind of complex anymore, but rental of the unit itself.
Sure.
The planning commission spent quite a bit of time talking about water and sewer for those units also. We've been talking with Brett Miller, water superintendent. He has indicated that each one of those units has a curb stop.
I believe, pretty sure they do.
Each one currently does have a meter as well. So, that was one of our concerns from, I guess, city utility side. Sewer was another concern, and it's, of course, any service line to the main is responsibility of the property owner. However, if you have two units combined into one service line and you back up, that might be an issue for not necessarily the city, but for whoever purchasing these units. And I think, Michael, you addressed some of that in the memorandum.
Yeah, Yeah, and it's fairly common, with, you know, condos or, you know, duplexes that are subject to an HOA where you just have to address those issues and responsibilities in the declaration. And I think how we'll address it is if it's a line that benefits a single building, then it'll just be the owners of the units within that building who would share in that cost. If it's something to do, if there's a breakage within the unit itself, then that unit owner would be responsible for the whole cost. If it's kind of more of a main line, that the property owner or owners would be responsible for, that kind of serves all of the properties, then all of the owners would share in the cost, and that'll all be spelled out in the declaration, and they'll have the obligation to comply with that.
All right, any other questions for Michael? Like I said, I think Lisa mentioned the planning commission really recommended this, based, assuming that those questions were answered. I think they provided answers, so if anybody wanted to take any action?
What's going on south
The southern end is where the garages are. And I believe there's 6 garages, and so the way they have this new plat written, would be to separate each of those garages as its own lot. And then there's another lot on the east side there, on the southeast corner, that says Outlot A, which I believe, Michael, is just a grass area. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I think it's just a retention area, is what it is, that outlaw is.
So there'd be
But
12.
yeah, there's no improvements on it, it's a vacant area.
There'd be 12, if this was approved, there'd be 12 housing units and 6 garages, all slabbing separately.
So, I guess as they sell more now, I decide which garage are attached to the units at the start, and then they just presumably transfer the sales, or?
Yeah, can you speak to that, Michael, I guess how the sale would work with, between the 12,000 units versus the 6 garages? Presumably, the first 6 purchases would have the first rights to those garages, and anybody thereafter would be out. Michael?
Michael, are you still with us? I don't think so.
Cell phone, Michael Stan. Please leave a brief message with your name and number, and I'll get back to you.
Yes, Michael was
Maybe
done
lost
with our
service.
conversation.
So we can, whatever they prepaid for services.
Hello?
Hi, this is Michael Sands calling back in.
AOL.
On the internet.
Right, do you want to give me a call back?
Yeah, I'll just hang up and call you back.
Okay.
My notes and my. Like I have. Like I looked on the website, our local radio station says it's next week, Wednesday. Like, I had in my notes and that the meeting was the 15th.
Oh, somebody's gonna be gone?
And, yeah, I even checked your radio station and it said the same thing. So like, I'm at total loss.
There is?
I got a screenshot of it.
Remember that from last month? I thought I saw on today's events that it was today, but I'm not gonna say that 100%. No, there's sure is
Michael?
on there.
Hi, Michael. It's Lisa.
We got your facts.
All right. I could hear you, but it sounded like you couldn't hear me. I apologize for that if that was on my end.
No, our conference line is linked to our fax line, so.
Okay. Well, and before even you lost me, I could hear you, so I did hear the question on the garages. So, the plan would be that the garages would be sold, as kind of on a first come, first served basis, of the unit owners that wanted a garage. Or if, if none were all that interested in them, then it would just go to the six southernmost lots. But I'm sure that folks will be interested in those garages, so that's how it would work out.
And on the parking spaces, outdoor spaces, so it looks like they're all technically on the lots on the westernmost units. Would those be treated as public space of the HOA, or how will that be handled?
Yeah, so kind of the diagonal fill, those lines, that's common area. So yeah, that'd be under the control of the HOA.
Okay.
And can you, Michael, just for the benefit, can you explain like you did to the planning commission the other night about the HOA, the ownership and H&S partnership involvement in that HOA?
Yeah, you bet. So HOAs, when they're first formed, there's always a period in which in order to form an HOA and file a declaration, it has to all be under common ownership at the beginning, which it is by H&S partnership. And so H&S would form the HOA and file the declaration before any of the lots are sold. And in the declaration, there's always what's called a period of declarant control, kind of meaning the period in which the original owner controls the HOA for purposes of really just making sure that things can operate smoothly until the units are sold. And then once a certain amount of units are sold, and that can be however the owner wants it to be. It could be until they don't own any more units and all of them have been sold, or more than half of them are sold, whatever is put in the declaration. at that point, it triggers automatically a switch in control of the HOA to all of the unit owners. And each unit owner would share an equal membership interest and voting rights in the HOA. So they would appoint their own officers, et cetera.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Ready to take action? Do I have to close the public hearing before they vote on it? I think I do.
Technical.
All right, if there's no other comments, we're gonna close the public hearing at 6:00. And now, we're open for business.
The planning commission's recommendation was to go ahead.
Yep, if the council felt comfortable with, I guess, what information was provided in the memorandum, then we said it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like each unit can be its own standalone unit. They've got the required hookups and everything. That's kind of what's held us up in the past from providing things logistically. Whereas each, they all either on standalone unit, I guess I would move to, we approve the recommendation and approve the subdivision.
You'd be actually approving the subdivision then.
Make the motion to approve the subdivision and replat of lots 1 through 18 and outlot A of Morrison Second Edition to the city of Ainsworth, Brown County, Nebraska.
Second.
Motion and a second, any other discussion? Call the roll.
Dustin,
Yes.
Vance,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
I know you just maybe can prove that, I wonder, so, and this is gonna test anybody, this was before my time, were those originally put in using like low to moderate grant funds potentially by that builder? And I would imagine if they're doing this, they would not be trying to run afoul of any requirements from, it's before,
They
they
were
were in here
built in
before.
2000.
Yeah,
According to
so
the
it was
assessment.
before I was back here. But I didn't know if there were any requirements of having to say like low, moderate income rental units, or if they received grant funds to assist.
It's probably a 20-year deal.
It could have been, that's why maybe it expired, I don't know.
Is Michael still on?
You have any knowledge on that, Michael?
It's my understanding that there aren't any such encumbrances on the property. I can confirm that with the client, but I don't believe there are.
So that was,
If there are, you'll probably have to deal with it anyway, Michael, so I'm sure you'll figure out one way or another.
And I don't think, I mean, that doesn't influence the city zoning, which will only influence your guys' business, so I think, yeah. Yeah, so the motion passed. I guess we can let you go unless you have any other questions or comments.
I don't think so. I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
All right. Make sure we didn't skip anything. All right, next, old business. Discuss and consider the counter proposal by Tower Alliance for the American Tower lease with the city of Ainsworth. Do you want to address that, or should I, or? I can try, you correct what I messed up. We talked about this, well, for months now, but Michael wanted a little more time to visit with the folks before, after the last meeting. And he did contact the Tower people, Tower Alliance. And essentially, well, you probably saw the information in your packets. his recommendation at this point, he asked about a one-time payout and felt that the offer was fairly low at this point. And so his recommendation at this point was to go ahead with the current offer, but that potentially a couple years from now, may ask for a one-time buyout. And I guess the formula the guy uses is based on what's currently happening. So in a few years, if we have this new formula, the buyout would be much higher. If they would be willing to offer a buyout, it might be worth it at that time, but it wasn't a lot of money at this point, like 61,000 or
61,000.
something like that. So that was Michael's recommendation. Of course, you're free to choose whatever you feel is prudent.
So latest counter proposal is $7,500 one-time payment, and then $8,400 a year.
With a 3% escalator annually, and, some other provision,
10% there.
which is probably not likely.
I can't imagine Mobile One
Yeah.
being allowed.
And like, Michael had said, you know, in what, 6 years or whatever is what it would take to basically get the buyout amount, that maybe at that point in time, reevaluate it with them and see if the buyout option is a better deal.
Well, it's kind of time to move on, so I'd make a motion to accept the counter proposal by Tower Alliance of America, tower lease with the city of Ainsworth.
There you go, Rod, you finally lost that 1 inch of publication on the old business.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion?
You're just the bulletin.
Yeah, the Voltron.
From Michael's.
Yeah.
Letter of the deal.
The additional 5 years, current lease expired 2036, increased in rent $8,400 annually, $700 monthly, a 3% rent escalator annually, a 10% revenue share, and a one-time signing bonus of $7,500.
It's an additional 20 years on the lease. on
Or
top of it.
it was 4 or 5 year term.
Yeah, an additional 20 years on top of what it's already.
All right, everybody understand the motion and no other questions or comments? Go ahead and call the roll.
Vance,
Right.
Brad,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Dustin.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Because I'd have to, I mean, the thought about taking the buyout, and it's Bella's thought is 20 years from now, will we even be using those towers? So maybe if the buyout was substantial, it'd be worth taking the money, because I've got a feeling it might be all satellites or Chinese weather balloons in the future. I don't know. All right, next on the agenda, and I think we got everything covered up to now, so we're gonna go in order from here. Consider resolution 22-16 on the loan agreement with NDED, project number C318064, clean water, SRF for Main Street's sewer main improvements.
So really, this item and the next item are kind of hand in hand, really. As Doug had talked, the water sewer main replacement project is slated to go from the treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant south to basically South Street.
Yep.
But because of DOT's project scope for the city, that whole project kind of gets broken into 2 pieces, which is 4th Street to the treatment plant, which is kind of like phase 1, which is outside of DOT's project scope, and then 4th Street South, which will be in conjunction with DOT. So of course, we have the paving piece with the project that we won't have, with the south project, because the state's going to be picking up that tab with their project. So this SRF funding is going to cover the entire water and sewer main replacements for both projects. So that's how the agreements are written. There is loan forgiveness written into both of the drinking water and clean water agreements, which, you know, is nice for the city. I think combined rate is 1%, 0.5% interest, 0.5% kind of administrative fee back to SRF over a 30-year period. Have had approval with USDA. Of course, we have, you know, a long-term debt with them. That was a condition of that loan, that any future debt that the city takes on would have to, that has to do with clean water. So we've had that, we've got that clearance. Michael has reviewed these agreements as well. He and I had a conversation today, and he is, really doesn't have concerns with the agreements for the city. Because that was a requirement also, that he has sort of given his stamp of approval, providing the city is in agreement to move forward with the projects. So, I don't know if there's any questions about the SRF funds. We had a conference call with Lisa at DEE yesterday.
2 days ago, yesterday, something like that, yeah.
It
all blurs together.
One between the two of them, and that's for all the water, sewer,
Correct.
and then your
Water.
forgiveness is amount about 1.2 of that? or
Yeah, it was
1.?
like 40.5% of the overall project cost was loan forgiveness. So I think for the one side, it was, sorry, I don't have that document right in front of me, but it was like 800 and some thousand for one, and close to 800,000, because I think there was a max, they could only forgive up to 820,000 or something like that per.
It's closer to 1.6. It's
So,
forgivable.
but it was like 40.5, I think,
Yeah.
percent of the total project cost, which is the maximum allowed amount to be forgiven.
So when if you're gonna bond that, do you still bond the total and they come back and reimburse for part of that, or how does?
The nice thing about SRF is it's not a reimbursement basis, so we won't have to have construction financing. SRF can serve as the construction financing, so we shouldn't have interim interest that we have to worry about, things like we did on the last
Yeah.
project. So that's nice about the SRF funding.
So they forgive that off the top and then you borrow the rest up for 30 years, it's not a,
Basically, you borrow the whole thing,
Okay.
and I think the way it's written is it's 10 years. You have to make your payments faithfully for 10 years, and then the loan forgiveness kicks in. So you really wouldn't necessarily be able to pay off the loan early and get your loan forgiveness if you didn't follow the first 10 years of the schedule, I believe is the way that is written. I don't foresee the city paying that off for 10 years, so I'm not sure that we have to worry about
I
that.
don't think we need one more to do it.
Yeah. But we should be sitting good. Our water bond comes off in 2024. So really the only thing coming out of debt service at that point in time when this project really kicks in terms of payback is going to be the USDA loan, which quite frankly is serviced through wastewater rates anyway. We have the sweeper payment right now is coming out of that. That's about $28,000. So debt service is pretty wide open for servicing these loans.
So I just want to clarify it though. So this project really is not gonna affect us having to raise the rates or anything like that?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. We should be able to service this through our existing debt service.
Any other questions, comments? So what action do we need to take to
basically the state has gone to a DocuSign, electronic DocuSign thing now, so if you agree to move forward and authorize, I basically would send an email tomorrow to DEE and they can send us the DocuSign documents. And then once we sign, Michael can send his opinion of council, and that's the other piece that will attach to it.
I believe they want two separate motions, one for drinking water, one for.
Yes,
clean
so
water.
it'd be a motion to approve
No,
resolution
you got questions?
2216, and then a motion to approve and authorize the signing, I would add.
Doug, you have to have those numbers in front of you on the two. Don't, you know,
I don't have the
think I've
numbers,
got
I'm
them.
sorry, I know I've got them
No,
back.
that's okay, I think I've got them in the office.
Okay.
I can shoot them with an email.
That, yeah, I think I still have that first one.
It should be, I guess, for council members in the packet, it's, I don't know what page it's on in there.
I was looking through the attachments to see if it was on one of the websites.
It's, there's a amortization schedule in there that we should have used in there. But given that CDBG has been awarded, we did get release of funds, so providing, approval of this funding, we're good to go for that North project. Funding wise, anyway. It's maybe toward the end of it.
Puts you a lot of scrolling.
That's a big file.
Well, the agreements are 41 and 42 pages.
And at the top it says that's 1.5 million. Total principal is 825, loan forgiveness is 675, or a total of 1.5 million. Term is 30 years.
What was the first number, Brad, 675 forgiven?
Yeah, the principal is 825.
I'm not sure it's exact on the second one, but they're close. They're kind of close to that.
Yeah, I think the drinking water was less than the clean water, if I
Mhm.
recall.
Which one was that one that you just read there, Brad? Is that the
That's
sewer?
drinking water.
That's the drinking water.
I think the clean water one had more forgiveness.
I've got clean water pulled up, it's, 1.19 million on the total principal of 810. That's 22 million.
10 forgiven, and it was 1.19 principal. That's for the sewer one? Okay, thank you guys.
Any other questions on the loan agreement?
I move to approve resolution 22-16, authorizing Joel Palmer and Lisa Schroeder to sign the loan agreements with the NDEE project number C318064, Clean Water SRF for Main Street sewer main improvements.
Second.
Motion and a second, any other discussion? Go ahead and call the roll.
Brad,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Dustin,
Yes.
Vance.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. I don't know if I have to read through the whole business on the next one, we've been discussing it already.
Yeah, I'll also move to approve resolution 22-17, authorizing Joel Palmer and Lisa Schroeder to sign the loan agreement documents with the NDEE project number D311685, drinking water SRF for the Main Street water main improvements.
Second.
Motion and a second, any other discussion? Go ahead and call the roll.
Sean,
Yes.
Yes.
Dustin, Vance,
Aye.
Brad.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is discuss and consider the proposal by Top Coat Inc. for Armor Coat. This has got some new numbers, well, you've probably seen them in your
Yeah, it should be in your packet. And it did increase, you know, significantly from a year ago, which is probably no surprise to anyone. Which probably just means that we will do less blocks than we normally do, but.
What was it last year?
I think it was $1.11.
That was quite a bit then.
It had been 108, and I think we kind of locked in last year at $1.11, and now it's about 150.
Yeah, over 160.
So, I mean.
How many blocks are we thinking?
Well, in the past, we usually budget, well, we always budget, it seemed like $65,000. And in the past, that got us somewhere between 28 and 30 blocks, usually depending on the linear footage of the blocks. This year, it might get us more like 26.
Is there some streets that really need to be, or can we kind of cut back on?
Last year was a good year because we didn't have a lot of snow or moisture in the streets, so we didn't really actually have a lot of patching.
After all the
This
snow
year's
melts and
gonna be
stuff,
a-
might be a little different.
Different story, yeah. I think the street department's in for a hellacious spring and summer.
We've been
So-
doing a lot of asphalt, and keep raising our streets up, and that's kind of, is part of our problem with the drainage and stuff like that as well.
Yes,
So I'm not a huge fan of armor coating, but I know it needs to be done.
it's kind of a necessary evil until we can do a paving project.
Then we can't do a paving project on all the streets.
Yeah, typically the street department, they'll identify, you know, during the summer months, which streets, and they rotate, you know, if streets have been armor coated in the last year or 2, 3 years, you know, we try to do the, rotate them around, so every, I don't know how many, a handful of years, it's not the same streets getting armor coated all the time, but we haven't sought other bids, armor code, I don't know if that's something the council wants us to consider.
We did that 1 year and got the
Tried.
other, and it was really bad.
Other companies, and we've had the best luck with Top Coat.
Well, I'd make a motion to go into a contract with Top Coat to do our own armor coating for 2023 for a cost of $1.598 per square yard.
Second.
Motion and second, any other discussion?
Then we're just gonna do kind of what we budgeted for within that,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Call roll.
Feston,
Yes.
Vance,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Next item is to discuss and consider partitioning the PFAS brand polyfluoroalkyl substances cost recovery program and sampling project under Nebraska drinking water.
I wanted to hear you read that one. Polyfluoroalkyl?
Yep. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances.
So in a nutshell, our understanding of this is the fire suppressant, you know, this PFAS is basically a chemical in the fire suppressant that's being used widely. And there's concern apparently that this chemical might be seeping into drinking water. And so the state and various other drinking water organizations like NERMA.
All 49 states and Nebraska are doing this.
And it's a preventative measure. It's basically,
This chemical does not break down.
should contaminate, you know, by agreeing to participate in this effort, basically, should we find contamination in our drinking water at some point in the legislature, it appears as though there's going to be remedial actions or funding measures that will come down the pipe for communities to try to alleviate the contamination.
They're
So
going,
by signing on to the effort now, essentially we're putting our name on the list, that if that happens, we would be eligible for that assistance.
They're going after the global, if this happened, going after the global manufacturer, not if like somebody here was selling that. They go after the global manufacturer, and they've already retained a lawyer. I read his name earlier, I can't say
That's
it
the
right
retainer
now.
that's in the package.
So what's the hazard that they find this
There's
in?
a lot of health hazard to this.
Like,
Anywhere from birth defects to all the way, just all kinds of things, to getting nervous disorders, to all the way to death.
Right, when you say fire suppressant, if I read on this, I think this was used by some of the companies that do like the non-stick pans and things like that, right? Cooking pans and things,
Also,
that's the PFAs.
Also, they use it in de-icing planes.
There's a lot of different types of the PFAS, and they were used in a lot of different things. They're most worried about the fire suppressant now because it got sprayed everywhere and nobody knows where. But yeah, like you said, Teflon contains some, a lot of other substances, a lot of other stuff that we've been using contains some PFAS. So ultimately, we're expecting EPA to come out with regulations on PFAS in drinking water. I don't know how long that's gonna take. They've been looking at it for a couple of years now, but I would expect that to come out.
so if it's in our drinking water, it's a huge expense.
Right, so that's the
Yeah,
idea.
That's why we're doing this.
I mean, it could be anywhere from chlorinating all the time to building a water treatment plant. Just depends on the saturation, what would happen to be.
And part of the participation is a sampling program.
Yeah.
Where the city would actively sample water for this substance.
So there's no real like traditional, there's no like huge cost up front or no?
Right now, no, even the testing kits that we've received have been free.
The example I got, let's say we, $1,000. The attorney get 20%, the city get the other
If there was
a cost.
Okay, all right.
80. Yeah. We were notified about a month ago. Got an email from the Brasboro Water, and I called Randy Helbush to see what this was. And I asked him, should we sign up for it? He said, I strongly suggest you did. So I did, and then it got to this step.
And there's no, from my understanding, there's no cost to the city.
There's no cost to the city, I don't even think at this point there's a risk to the city.
That's what I wanted you guys to
Yeah.
kind of talk about, that this isn't, oh, this is just Ainsworth, this is a nationwide.
This is all
And it's just
Monitoring at this.
precautionary.
It's preventative, I would say at this point in time, just should we ever detect or sample it in our water, that we're,
I've got the water, they sent them last week, the water. I'm just waiting to see what you guys did, the test. And the first test is based like a baseline, kind of like we do in ambulance, you know, we pick up first, we know what the vitals are first. This is the same thing.
and I would imagine that the initial sampling is really to just also give data back to the legislature, the EPA on what's out there, what the threat level is. So at this point in time, no, it's not code red or anything with Ainsworth drinking water.
No.
We don't have any contamination of our drinking water. This is a preventative measure.
No, but my next question was like, something we're dealing with right now, and people aren't gonna be calling tomorrow freaking out.
Nobody needs to be concerned.
No.
Okay, this is not a hazard where,
To me, it's like just a nationwide sampling effort.
They said it's kind of like an insurance policy.
Baseline data.
Yep.
And like I said, there's no cost, no harm to the city, I think, to participate in this program.
Well, given that, I move that the city participate in the PFAS cost recovery program and sampling project under the Nebraska Drinking Water Program.
Never heard of that.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, even though we haven't skipped over it. Motion and a second, any other discussion?
This is a big.
Go ahead and call the roll.
Vance,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Dustin.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. And I think we are to the last item on the agenda, well, second to last. So discuss and consider law enforcement agreement with Brown County Sheriff's Office. Just a little background, we have met a couple times with the county attorney and the new sheriff, Brent Dibler, and Zach Welch attended the last meeting too. Lisa and I and Brad and Vance was at the first meeting, and was sick the second one, and I forgot to dial in. At this point, it's just been discussion about where we want to go. The law enforcement contract, current one is expired. So the county brought a starting point to the meeting we had a couple days ago, which I like that. They've got something written down, said, what's your reaction to this? We talked about some different things. And I guess what I would ask is for you guys to take some time, look that over, see what your recommendations are. We're scheduled to meet with them again, you know, to give our feedback. What day is that? Next week.
16.
16. So yeah, if you could get any comments, or we can discuss anything now before the 16th.
Where's that gonna be at, or just talk to you, or can we go to your meeting?
Well, we can't have
Can't have
a
it.
quorum for city council, so I think Vance and Brad probably, and unless you guys arm wrestle for who attends. Or we could call a special meeting too, if we had to or wanted to. But the goal would be, my goal would be to have something that we would approve at our next city council meeting in March. And the county thought that was a good timeline too, so that's sort of what where we're at right now. I don't know if you had any comments, Brad, or Vance from meetings or Lisa?
No, I guess I'm kind of looking to see what their new proposal is. Because, you know, we was here the other day, he's gonna rewrite some stuff in there and see what that looks like. And
When will you see the new one?
I don't know.
I didn't remember,
Say.
they were gonna rewrite something?
yeah, they took some stuff out. I mean, I just wanted to see, they took some stuff out of this one here, and they was gonna add a couple comments that I made, and so this is actually what we went over the other day, but like, you know, in this one here, section 8 was actually gonna come out of this one.
Which is section
That was about the vehicle.
Yeah, about the vehicle and stuff like that.
That's one of the things we talked about. There's kind of a long drawn out process for buying and trading vehicles, and actually
Who
we,
gets what when?
Brent and I both agreed. I brought it up and he said, yeah, I've talked with a number of sheriffs and nobody's got this in an agreement. And it just seems like that could be a totally separate thing that will have a law enforcement agreement. So that's one of the things we talked about taking out and dealing with the vehicles separately. But any ideas you have, I mean,
Well, I gotta read the thing, but it seemed like from the past, it seemed like there was an excessive amount of money being, not that I totally disagree with all, but I'm just saying that, you know, I could totally see like deputy salary and half the vehicle or something, not what we were paying before.
And
And I don't know what it,
after the meeting we had the other day, and we did have some concerns about that, of what we were, you know, what we're getting for our money and stuff like that. And I think our ordinances was really talked about a lot, about making sure our ordinances get addressed, getting reports so we can see what they're doing in a timely manner, stuff like that. So I think moving forward, we're gonna see a lot more what they're doing for us. I am too, like you. I think we're paying way too much for law enforcement.
I think it was like 265,000 or something to that effect.
Yeah.
about 23,000 a month. So it's
207, 268.
Problem is you're between a rock and a hard place. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, we're in Brown County, I mean, they'd have to patrol no matter what.
Yes and no. I agree to a certain
I would
extent,
think
and I brought that up, and
Well, they don't do, there's a lot of stuff, and Long Pine has to have a lot of different people in the city structure to handle, because they won't touch anything other than
Whole city
emergency,
book.
basically. You'll get no speed enforcement, maybe state patrol, you'll get no, barking dogs, you'll get no nuisance abatement. I mean, none of your city ordinances will be enforced from the sheriff's department side.
It'd be a
So-
slight change from.
Yeah.
You know, and the sad part is, they have you between the rock and a hard spot, is that you could go back and hire your own police officers. Who's gonna do your dispatching? They're gonna charge you $260,000 just to do the dispatching.
I agree with you
I
fully,
get it.
Ron, and I know I have a hard time on this because it is, you know, in the past, we paid this kind of money out, and my opinion is, I'm sure that the office had some interaction more than what the council did, but for the kind of money we were paying, I never seen a whole lot of return on our money on paper or what we're doing,
Yeah.
what ordinances are being enforced, which ones do we need to readjust so they can be enforced. And I think after talking at our meeting the other day, that there's gonna be more interaction.
More communication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with those,
We did talk
and
about
being, the officers themselves will know our ordinances, and when they're driving around town, know what ordinances need to be enforced, which ones don't. So I think in the past, it was more, what ordinances do we tell them to enforce? Or we get in a complaint, they get in a complaint at the sheriff's office, and then they go out and enforce it. I wanna see going forward that they know our ordinance books, they see a violation, they take care of it. And then they report to us, and I can say, I'd like to know on a monthly basis, you know, what ordinances have they talked to people about? I don't care who they are, I don't need to know the name of who it was, but, you know, if they got different sidewalks that have not been scooped, or vehicles parking on the street for a number of days, you know, I'd like to know some of that stuff. And with that, I'm sure maybe that kind of dollars is appropriate. It's still awful a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. One of the things, I looked through the city file that goes back to 20 years ago or so when the first one was done. And somebody did an analysis of that after that first contract. And the thing was, they said, well, in the end, it saved the city money and it saved the county money. And since that time, it's kind of been a piss and match every time they renegotiate it. Well, you saved 2% more than we did. You're going up or whatever. And so I tried to impress that this is probably good for both of us, but on the other hand, the city took 35% increase the last 3 years, which is fairly substantial. And so, yeah, we need to get our value out of
Well, it needs to
what
come
we're
back
paying.
to what we're paying for.
Yeah.
We're not paying for a county law enforcement service from the city budget. Everybody inside the city already pays for that with their county taxes. We're paying for enforcement of our rules. If we're dedicating X amount of resources, there needs to be accountability that those resources are utilized to enforce those rules. There's been no accountability in the contract for what our dollars are actually used to service. They just get X amount and do whatever they, you know, not that they don't have real jobs to do. They definitely have bigger problems to deal with at times, but that doesn't mean that we're not still paying for what we're paying for. So that's what I'd like to see, some way we can tie in an accountability number on the front end. I like the back end reporting so we know, okay, that is getting done. But we need to have some sort of measure that we can look at, that if we're paying X amount of dollars, we get X amount of, I don't know if that's deputy hours or something, and there's, like I said, there's dispatching that's different, gets factored into the cost of things, but
You know, I know we've discussed it in the past amongst some of us that, you know, for this amount of money, how many officers do we get? So then if one officer quits, it takes them, you know, they have to have adequate time to get that person hired back. But if that person doesn't get hired back, is there a break back to us on the next month that we don't have that officer? Because that's going to hinder what they do for us because they're gonna be short-staffed. To me, I think that, something like that should be in the contract as well, that, what is this how many officers is this contract?
with set man hours.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah, I
it's
think
set something like that, then we don't have to worry if they're down an officer. They gotta figure that out, because they're contractually obligated. If we pay this amount, that we get X amount of
If
service.
we come up with a measurable thing to put in there, you know.
But we haven't seen their budget to know what their officer cost is. We have no idea what their officer cost is.
I think we can request that.
I mean, we know what their total budget is, and we know what we're paying, and I think we're about.
You know, to get to that point, I think there's, you know, in the past, the law enforcement agreement has been pretty vague.
Outside of the vehicle.
The
one item that had any sort of detail or account.
And now you're getting rid of that.
Nobody can keep
You
track
said the
of it.
city pays about half the overall department budget, but
About 40-some%.
When we negotiated 3 years ago, I think our amount was about 40%.
Well, I think about 57%. I thought it was more than half.
Of their operating
In
budget.
our solid waste, we pay about 57%.
Maybe that's what I'm getting confused with. Okay, I was like,
But I was thinking at the time, their budget was like 800,000. We were paying the 260 or 270.
Well, I thought the recent budget was 660 something, 6, but I'd have to check.
So what you're saying, Brad, you're gonna negotiate a better deal?
I'm like Rod, I'd love to. I even what they're planning on doing for us, I think it's way too expensive, but I think they might just say, take it or leave it.
I don't think they're gonna do that, where they're gonna come up with the extra. I don't think they're in any less of a harder spot than.
no, they're in the same.
And quite frankly, dispatch for ordinances, what do we need that? What do we need? Are we required to provide 24-hour dispatch for our ordinances?
I don't think so.
I mean,
Do they tell you every time that 70% of our calls come from city of Ainsworth?
Well, the last time we got a report that I had ever seen was in 2016. It was the last time I seen a report like that.
Okay, so when I've heard this discussion on the other side, it's been, well, calls inside the Ainsworth city limits account for such and such percent of their total call volume.
well, it may have that breakdown,
Which
but
also makes
of those ordinance calls.
Because that's where the.
Well, I wrote it down in 2016, the number of ordinances they looked at for us, each ordinance would have cost us $1,657 per ordinance.
Per ordinance
For that year in
violation.
2016.
Now it's based off just the ordinance calls,
That
right?
was just off the ordinance calls, yes.
So those calls received, that might not even been.
And city residents
Yeah.
do pay a portion of the overall sheriff's budget as well, so again, it's residents
But we're only-
inside, property
we
owners
only-
inside the city are getting hit twice.
And when we did this contract last time in 2019, COVID coming into play with a lot of that, but they've almost had a complete turnover in almost 100% staffing. Pretty much.
Since what year?
19. And then we do have a new sheriff, which,
Yeah, Zach, Ian, and Kyle have
Say
been
the
around
office
quite a
would be
while.
the
DJ's been
deputies
around
would be-
quite a while.
BJ's
Yeah,
gone.
I did hear that.
Um,
yeah.
all the dispatchers have been turned over.
One thing we both agreed on, or both sides agreed, I think, that this would be a one-year contract this go around, so that gives Brent a chance to get, you know, his feet on the ground for time and see how it goes, and then we do another one next year. Maybe next year would be a 3-year.
I don't want the city any less safe or anything by that means, but if we're paying them, their sole purpose of paying them is to uphold ordinances, $270,000 is a lot of money to uphold ordinances.
And patrol our streets and keep them safe, that's gonna be a cost of that. And weren't they gonna kinda designate, when they're fully staffed, designate an officer to us? Or
Zach had spoke to that a little bit about how they do that. And, you know, if they get a call out in Alpine or Johnstown or out in Greater Brown County, they always, because of our contract, they basically ensure that there is always an officer on the ground in Ainsworth regardless. So somebody always stays back, so that their response time to calls in Ainsworth would be timely. So that's one thing that they are doing now, I guess, and have been doing, as a provision of the contract, even when they're short staffed.
That's why you see two vehicles over at Triple Dipper, BSing all the time.
But
We pay for that.
we
Yeah.
talked it out, and Brent had conferred, I guess, as well, that we should have probably a designated officer to do code enforcement. So
Somebody that
some of
may-
that depends on whether or not they are close enough to the cable.
I mean, if they had somebody that, you know, I wouldn't say that all of them would necessarily have to learn all the codes, but if they had an ISD officer who wanted to learn the city ordinances or code, that'd be something too.
And spends a certain amount of their day
Yeah, it's,
just patrolling for code enforcement as opposed to, because right now, let's be honest, the only time any of those are enforced is if somebody calls and complains to you or somebody calls the sheriff's department to complain.
exactly. And I like to see that, if they're driving around,
A little more proactive.
and they know, we know that's a violation, let's just kick in the butt right now and take care of it.
I mean, there's some obvious ones that all of them could know, just like when you get to, the end of June and grass is 2.5 feet high on somebody's yard. It doesn't take the rocket science to know all the ordinances that one should be enforced.
How about?
And I think everybody would like to see our new citizens get
Yeah.
a better handle on it.
Like as it sits right now, my daughter's walking to church after school, and she takes the street half the time. That kind of upsets me a little bit.
And there is no ordinance that they're supposed to clean their sidewalk, but once again, this is an unusual snowstorm, but there's.
Yeah, we had adequate time to sweep your sidewalk by now.
Don't go there. Don't go there, because the city is one of the worst offenders for cleaning the intersections and dumping it right where the sidewalk is. So these homeowners are having to dig through 4 or 5 foot of snow to get through to the street.
I
And
get
they're,
there's some
the city's
issues.
one of the worst offenders.
I get that there's some issues with heavier snow and a bunch of snow, but when you see kids going from school and just walking home and having to take the street,
Oh, I understand that.
opposed to a sidewalk, you know, like, you know, we can sit here all day, but if one kid gets hit on a street or a highway because they can't walk down the freaking sidewalk, then I'm gonna have a real issue. I guess I already kinda do have an issue, like sidewalks not being good, but yeah, I understand, like,
Yeah.
snow in the middle of the street, like when I tried coming from like the coffee shop to pull on the main street, I can't see anything, intersections or the snow in the middle of the street, I can't see any road, you know, cars coming down the road. You know, like all that, I think, in my opinion, needs to be addressed. You know, I mean, and hopefully we don't have this 20 years snow of.
Yeah, I think some of that, I don't know if you guys read the paper or not, some of that has been addressed in the article that Ron wrote in the paper that came out yesterday and today, so maybe some of that addressed. And we do need the public's help as well as, you know, the volunteers that help move snow for other people. It's gonna be a joint effort between everybody to take care of that.
Right, like this is obviously a learning experience. We haven't had to deal with this for, I don't know how many years we've had to deal with, you know, but I think moving forward, we could come up with a plan to not pile in the intersections, you know, not, you know, bury the streets so we can't see incoming traffic.
It's an unusual year.
Moving forward, though, I'd make a motion to table the law enforcement agreement until we have time to talk about it or think about it. Maybe Lisa can get a current deal from Andy that might make some of that, but I definitely think there needs, other than what we talked about the other day, there needs to be more in that contract, but I move the table it until next meeting.
Motion and second, any other discussion?
Probably good to get everybody a copy so that if you two are the reps, that they get read in and at least give you things to talk about.
But I've already, my look, sounded of it, of what I think what we want in there. I know we were hoping to have it voted on in the March meeting, but we're gonna add some of this other stuff. I think there's gonna be some
When
negotiations,
did the
sit down and
current
talk.
contract expire?
July of 22.
Contract expired June 30 of last year.
And we kind of waited, knowing, of course, that Brent was coming in. We met with Bruce at that time and decided status quo rather than him signing an agreement and locking a new sheriff into something. So we've kind of just done a month by month. Let Brent get in.
You got a month, you just extended the existing contract each month at that rate till then.
Motion to table, go ahead and call the roll.
Brent,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
James.
Motion carried unanimously, and yeah, everybody will get the information, just keep brainstorming, thinking of ways to make it better. We'll get it sorted out.
Still the city police force in high school, that would have been about,
I think 2,000 was
2,000 was
when
the-
it came in. 'cause I
Got
know
Ron,
there was
I got
still-
Ron Phillips and Ryan Sylvester about the last two that was on the Haynesville Police Force.
Steve Swett was one of them, Blaze, I think.
When did this building go up?
2,000.
Yeah, they were still down in the basement of the old building down by the fire hall.
That's probably why it was negotiated, so that they didn't have to build offices. But yeah.
All right, city administrator report. What do you got, Lisa?
Well, we got the rural workforce housing land development application submitted. So I did get confirmation from DED that it was received, so I guess we'll just kind of wait and see what comes of that, hopefully something.
Did you ever ask Lisa, so, we had an NCDC meeting today and they're moving forward on an application as well. Did you get so is yours gonna get awarded before the rural workforce housing funds will get awarded? And what happens if the city gets awarded but
Yeah, I know.
NCDC doesn't? I wonder if there's some questions on that, if it's not coordinated. You have to partner with somebody, but yet they're separate applications, so.
Right, so the guidance document for our program said awards would be
February, March.
announced in February,
Yeah.
like towards the end of February, but I think your application isn't even due until.
End of March, March 24th, 25th.
So, yeah, it's a little bit of a pickle,
Yeah.
how that's gonna work out. I don't.
I think DED, I'm not sure DED knows the answer, to be honest, or really thought that through. I think they're trying to get money out the door. I think they've got some COVID money that has to get spent probably by the end of the fiscal year, or committed. So,
Yeah, I'm hopeful that that doesn't mean that, like, our application can get awarded less points because it's not an existing,
I could show them.
grant. I don't know how that's gonna work out. We did apply for, you could apply up to $1 million, we applied for $750,000. It's basically, for land site prep, so acquisition, demolition, site prep. So the vacant nuisance properties that we have and what we thought the city might be able to acquire, that's how we came up with that.
So like rural workforce, there's 2-to-1 match, so if we
There's no
apply, there is no city match, this is just, okay.
Zero match.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah, no risk to the city to apply whatsoever.
Maybe we can get 70,000 down.
So, yeah, it actually would really give us the ability to overcome our obstacle, because right now the obstacle is
Can't really apply.
acquisition and demolition. And that's exactly what this grant would do,
Yeah.
so I'm
Talk and
hopeful.
talk and talk, but your hands are tied.
I'm hopeful that, we'll get some funds from that, we can do something. Otherwise, it's been a lot of Highway 7, Highway 7, Highway 7. Same old snow. And I did, just for notification purposes for the city council, I did receive a lawsuit summons. This incident has been referred to LARM, our liability insurance provider, who will assign legal counsel to respond to it on our behalf. Basically, the incident involves an individual that, gosh, what would it have been, almost 2 years ago now?
No, it was last year.
A year ago about this time. Individual from out of town came to the school for a wrestling match and fell on the sidewalk. So the school is also named in the suit as well. as it stands with city ordinance and state statute, the duty to keep clean is on the adjacent property owner. It's not the city's duty to keep clean the sidewalk or repair. So at this point in time, I think from the city's standpoint, we're a secondary participant. I know, I don't want to speak on behalf of the school, but I know there's been talk ongoing from their standpoint. And so our team presumably will be collaborating with their team. I guess we will see where that goes. If I get any more updates on that as it progresses, I will let you know.
In my opinion, it's a baseless claim, so he's just fishing for somebody who's willing to settle out of court, but, you know, that's what they do, so.
We'll collaborate and cooperate, I guess, with the proceedings as they move forward. And as I get updates, I will let the council know. But as of right now, like I said, it's in the hands of LARC and they're formulating the response to the summons.
It is a scary deal, you know, like I've got that big parking lot out in front of the office, somebody walking across there, slip, fall, whatever, your life could be liable. Doesn't make sense.
There are mitigation factors. I mean, if you've made reasonable efforts to abet the potential hazard, if you can show them you've got a contract for snow removal, and if you can show them photos of ice melt or whatever it
The
might be.
problem is you still have to
You still have to
hire
hire
the
the
attorney to
attorney.
get out from underneath it.
That's true.
Anything else for the good of the cause? I guess we paid our dues for that 27-minute meeting last month. We're gonna adjourn at 6:58. Thanks, everybody.
Right? Oh, really? Oh, right. Yeah.